We're here with Terry Pratchett, author of the book Snuff, as well as many, many, many other novels.
You left out on many.
Well, it's a real pleasure to have you here at Amazon.
Well, the first book I ever read was The Wind in the Willows, which I know is been published here, of course. And I think that everyone knows what it's about. It's very much a kid's book. But it seemed to me as a kid, I didn't have the vocabulary for understanding this stuff, but, you know, in The Wind in the Willows you've got a mole and a toad and a rat, and they all have adventures. But as the story goes on, you realise that, you start thinking, what size are these creatures? The toad can drive a car, and no one's actually saying, I mean, good grief, there's a toad driving a car, or it gets mistaken for a washerwoman. And I know washerwomen aren't, you know, don't have to be that much of a looker to be a washerwoman. But, you know, so I thought, you can act, and yet I've been reading this book and thinking, they're playing games with my head. You know, animals change their size, and you're kind of changing the world in people's heads. And I thought, this is cool, I want some of that. And one thing led to another, and once I found the real science fiction, then there was no stopping me. Actually, I read mostly non-fiction, because, and I think an awful lot of authors do. I mean, I read enough of everything else just to kind of keep in on what's going. But I read stuff about things I don't know, I mean real stuff. At the moment I'm working on a book set in early Victorian London, and I thought I knew quite a lot about early Victorian London. But I'm finding out an awful lot more by being very careful where I go reading, and I'm talking, you know, I can now afford to seek out experts and get the information I want. And I like doing that kind of research. And you know, I'm usually too busy to read. Sam Vimes actually created himself. It was quite fascinating, because when I did the first book of the Guard series, I thought the hero was going to be Carrot, you know, the new recruit, and we'd see everything through his eyes. And Vimes was the kind of washed out chief of police that everyone ignored, the cops were, you know, just spat on. And then in the course of about a couple of books, Vimes actually came out as the man, simply because I'd got inside his head. The nice thing about him is that he really does a lot of the work for me. As we know, if Lord Vetinari wants Vimes to do something, he forbids him to do it, so Vimes goes and does it. And you just really give Vimes the problem, and because I have, over such a long period, worked out the character of Vimes, I know what he's going to do in response to these particular things that happen. Which is, you know, kind of low-hanging fruit after all. There are some of the absolutes of crime fiction. If a detective or a policeman goes on holiday, we just know he's never going to have a chance to unpack the bucket and spade and the face cream, is he? He's not. Because the first corpse is going to drop out of the woodwork, you know, within about 2 minutes. And so, yes, you put him in a situation and in a context that he's unfamiliar with. He's out of his jurisdiction. So you have all the questions. He is a very senior policeman. He's written the book about policing. But there isn't actually, where he is now, someone for him to look up to. You know, he likes to have a boss, like Lord Vetinari, for example. That's where the buck stops. It doesn't stop with Vimes. He can discipline Vimes, and that's it. But then he has to, as it were, interpret the law from the word go in the situation in which he finds himself. Oh yeah, I mean I really love doing it, and I love doing the research, for example, and it's amazing what even for some quite trivial things you have to do a little bit of research, and I loved doing the riverboats. Because I was always been a Mark Twain fan, I always wanted to do riverboats, and I thought, how could I do riverboats in a place where there is no steam? And I thought, actually, I think we know how to do it, and it was fun to do, and had to work out how they worked and how you could, the gearing needed to do it all. Hunt tulips. So, I'm just going to get there. I'm just going to see what this place looks like, and it's just nice. But I was surprised that of all the little places. I mean, I've driven around the States a lot. I even went to Armpit, Wyoming, which is one of my favourites. And you see, right out in the middle of nowhere, no particular farming, but there's lots of people living here and there. And you think, why? What are they doing here? Are they overthrowing the government? What are they doing for a living? What's it like having to drive, 15 miles to pick up your mail? I like every so often to do something that's not Discworld, because it shakes you up a bit. You have to think in different ways. You can't just fall back on good old Vimesy or the Patrician. It makes you work. And that's the Victorian London one, which has got a working title of Happy Families. It might not be that one at the end, but publishers always wanted to have a working title. And I've been working with Steve Baxter on The Long Earth, which we got to finish, I think, by Christmas. I don't think we will, because of all the stuff I'm doing, but it's going to be fun to do. But that is really SF. It really needed 2 people to do it. In fact, it needed a lot more than 2 people. Now you see, you put your finger on the big red button, haven't you? When I started out, you could see the fans. You could recognise all the fans, as it were. They were generally kids, the occasional adult. These days, you do not know who the fans are. I know fans who are nuns, fans in the priesthood. When my wife and I were in Australia earlier this year, we kind of wafted across the continent on the wings of fandom, because anywhere we were going shopping, there was a fan there. But we now know that there's probably great-grandparents who can read Klingon, because SF now has been going for such a long time that it is actually mainstream. It really is. So many people buy it in all its infinite possibilities. I mean, the really hardcore stuff. And we have to take account of the fact that mainstream pinches from SF all the time. Alternate worlds, sliding doors, that sort of thing, time travel. You can do a posh book on something like that. Oh yes, I thought they're having a big laugh with this, and it was great because actually I was speaking to a lady here in Seattle, and no, Rob was, and she refused to believe that I had met the Queen. No one gets to meet the Queen. I said, well, I did. Twice. I do it for the kids, because usually that means some adult might be reading to them, and if you can say, well, look, I'll read to the end of the chapter. Well, I do what I call sub-chapters. You just break it down a bit. But, well, life does have chapters, it's true, but they are rather erratic chapters. So I just really plunge on and just keep it going. Well, I just did it because, first of all, it's just nice to sign a cheque for $1 million. See, if it was £500,000, it would be the same amount of money, but it doesn't got all the little sparkles on the top, you know. So, you know, they say that in about 5 years' time things are looking good, but I think they said that 5 years ago. So, although I must admit, recently there was another one came up, which I'm now on. It doesn't actually knock it off, but it does seem, I don't know, how can I put it? You like eggs?
Yes.
Like a boiled egg?
Yes.
Like a boiled egg with salt on it?
Absolutely.
Like it without salt on?
Sure.
Well, actually, I won't eat it if it hasn't got salt on.
I like it better with salt.
It actually, it's like it puts some salt on the day, and little things that you can't quite do, you can now do. And I don't know. It's called a Bixer, this particular one. I don't know why it makes that happen, but it does. You know, I've got a whole ring of guys, more or less, with the same predicament as me, and we get together, well, you know, online, as it were. And they were saying about this, and one saying, look, you know, it changed my life over about 2 days, and I found it was pretty close to that too. My trouble is, the future isn't happening fast enough. Everyone's got computers now. You've got computers out the wazoo. But where's all the Star Trek stuff happening?